Most women don't wake up in the morning thinking about how to destroy you, but some of them do it anyway. And they do it with a smile on their face and love in their voice. Not because they're evil, but because they're unconscious. Because they don't even see the damage they cause, or worse. They think your pain is proof that you love them. Have you ever wondered why, no matter how hard you try to be understanding, generous, patient, emotionally available, it's never enough? You compromise, you adapt, you hold your tongue, you give her space when she wants distance, and affection when she wants closeness. But something still doesn't feel right. You're not building a connection. You're walking on eggshells. That feeling in your gut, that heaviness behind your ribs, that's not confusion. That's your instinct screaming through the conditioning. Because you've been trained by media, by culture, by 100 subtle manipulations to believe that if she's upset, you've failed. If she pulls away, you've done something wrong. If she changes, it's your job to adjust. Let me be blunt. Some of the most dangerous traps don't look like betrayal. They look like affection. They sound like sweet vulnerability. They wear the mask of intimacy. But underneath, they are compulsive patterns, learned behaviors, not designed to nurture a bond, but to secure control, attention, or emotional power. And here's the worst part, she doesn't even know she's doing it. She says she just wants you to talk more. So you open up, you let her in, you reveal something raw about your past, your fears, your doubts, and for a moment, she melts. She touches your arm, she calls you brave, but a week later, in the heat of an argument, she throws your words back in your face. Suddenly, you're too emotional, too sensitive, not strong enough. You freeze. That same mouth that begged you to open up is now using your honesty as a weapon. And still, you hesitate to get angry because a part of you still wants to believe it was a mistake. That if you just explain yourself better, she'll understand. She won't, not because she hates you, but because she's chasing something she doesn't even realize: safety through dominance. Emotional leverage disguised as closeness. And the more you try to meet her needs, the more you abandon your own. It starts small. She tests how far she can push your boundaries. She teases you in front of friends. You laugh along, but something sinks in your chest. She criticizes your choices, your clothes, your friends. Your goals always framed as just trying to help. You defend yourself, but only halfway. You don't want to rock the boat. Then one day you wake up and realize you don't recognize yourself. You've become compliant, apologetic, passive. And here's the twisted irony. The more you shrink yourself to keep the peace, the more she loses respect for you. Because no matter what she says, she's wired to test your strength, not your ability to submit, but your ability to hold the line. You think compromise is love. She interprets it as weakness. You think being calm makes you safe. She interprets it as indifference. You think explaining yourself is clarity. She interprets it as desperation. And with every step you take trying to reassure her, you fall deeper into the emotional quicksand. You may think you're being noble, that enduring her mood swings, her silence, her drama is a form of love. But your nervous system knows better. You feel the tightening in your chest, the loss of energy, the subtle erosion of your confidence. That's not love. That's self-abandonment. A woman doesn't need to slap you, cheat on you, or leave you to destroy you. All she needs to do is slowly rewire your perception of what love requires. And if you're a man who's been taught that love means proving yourself, you are the perfect target. You will exhaust yourself trying to keep a connection that depends on you sacrificing your edge. You will confuse emotional volatility with passion. You will chase her approval until you don't even remember what your own boundaries feel like. She doesn't mean harm, but you will bleed for her anyway. And you will smile through the pain. Because the culture told you that a good man gives endlessly, even when no one's giving back. But here's the truth: the first time she crosses your boundary and you say nothing, that's not forgiveness. That's permission. And the first time you feel drained after a conversation but convince yourself she just needed to vent, that's not empathy. That's surrender. You are not broken. You are not weak. But you are caught in a system that profits off your silence and confuses your pain for love. It ends when you stop explaining yourself and start observing her patterns. It ends when you stop chasing emotional safety and start cultivating internal clarity. And it ends when you stop mistaking your exhaustion for effort. You've been taught that love is sacrifice, that being a man means enduring discomfort quietly, holding space for everyone else's emotions while suppressing your own. But here's what no one tells you: a woman will unconsciously test you, not just for your devotion, but for your willingness to betray yourself for her. And the moment you do, she feels it. She doesn't always understand what changed, but the dynamic shifts. Because now, you're not a man standing his ground. You're a man bending to stay liked. You've become agreeable, predictable, drained. Let's break this down. You think your empathy is a strength, and it is, when used wisely. But in the wrong dynamic, your empathy becomes a leash. She cries, and you rush to fix it. She's cold, and you chase warmth. She withdraws, and you move closer each time. She learns something: you are not responding from strength. You are reacting from fear. Fear of losing her, fear of being alone, fear of being seen as the bad guy. She didn't mean to set the trap, but now you're in it. You find yourself trying to predict her moods. You go over old conversations in your head, wondering if you said something wrong. You start choosing your words carefully, not because you want to speak kindly, but because you're afraid of triggering her. You justify her passive-aggressive comments. You excuse the coldness. You convince yourself she's just going through something. No, she's not going through something. She's managing you, not deliberately, not maliciously, but biologically and emotionally. She is wired to seek emotional certainty, and if that means pulling strings to control your behavior, she will. Most of it happens beneath the surface: a shift in tone, a glance that makes you question yourself, a withheld compliment, a backhanded joke. These are not coincidences, they are signals, and if you're not awake to them, you'll spend months, even years, performing for her approval. Here's what it costs you. You become smaller. You stop sharing your real thoughts. You stop leading. You hesitate. You flinch. Your gut tightens every time her name appears on your phone. You forget what it feels like to laugh without wondering if it'll be used against you later. This is not the life of a man. This is the slow death of masculine clarity. And the deeper tragedy: you still think this means you love her, because you were trained to believe love is endurance, that love means sticking through the storm, that love is proven by staying, even when your spirit is crumbling. That's not love. That's trauma bonding. That's the cycle of emotional enmeshment disguised as loyalty. Let's call it what it is: manipulation through confusion. She destabilizes your sense of self, and then becomes your source of emotional regulation. She makes you feel uncertain, and then you rely on her affection to feel whole again. And it works not because you're weak, but because you're human. Because the male brain, evolutionarily, is programmed to pursue safety through control. But in this case, your control is submission. You try to control her emotions by surrendering your own. It's backwards, and it's devastating. If you want to break the cycle, it starts here. You stop trying to fix her mood. You stop taking responsibility for her emotional weather. You let her be upset. You let her sulk. You let her throw the cold stares, the sarcasm, the guilt trips, and you do not chase. You do not explain. You do not beg. Why? Because your peace is not a bargaining chip. Your worth is not on trial every time she has a bad day. She doesn't mean to drain you, but the game works because you keep playing, because every time you fold under pressure, she feels a rush of control. And here's the truth she'll never say out loud. She respects you less each time you do. The moment you start reacting to every sigh, every withdrawal, every "I'm fine," you reinforce the message that your sense of self is dependent on her approval, and no woman wants to mother a man she secretly resents. So here's your way out: not anger, not revenge, not games, just this: boundaries that do not move. You stop texting when she goes silent. You stop explaining when she twists your words. You stop proving yourself, and you start observing. You watch the patterns. You name them silently. You don't confront her to win. You detach to see, because once you see clearly, the spell breaks. You don't argue. You don't plead. You don't try to make her see your side. You walk in with calm presence and a quiet edge, and if she still pushes your limits, you leave not to punish, but to protect. She won't understand at first. She may call you cold, distant, heartless, but she will feel the shift. She will feel that you are no longer the man who dances on the strings of her anxiety. And maybe, just maybe, that's when she'll start respecting you again. But that's not your goal. Your goal is to reclaim your center, regardless of how she responds. It's not about outsmarting her. It's about outgrowing the version of yourself that needed her approval to feel like a man. Because when you're operating from that place, that deep, subconscious craving for validation, you'll twist yourself into whatever shape she wants. And worse, you'll think you're being noble for doing it. You'll call it compromise, maturity, emotional intelligence. But what you're actually doing is negotiating your identity for temporary peace. And that peace doesn't last, does it? Because the moment she senses that her emotions dictate your actions, the dynamic shifts again. What used to be small jabs become larger ultimatums. The cold shoulders last longer. The affection becomes currency. Suddenly, she's rationing intimacy and testing your limits with every silence, every eye roll, every disappearing act after conflict. And every time you meet her halfway, you try to calm the storm, not realizing that she is the storm and you're standing there holding a bucket, thinking you're helping. You can't fix a dynamic by becoming smaller in it. You can't stabilize a connection when your stability depends on her mood. And you definitely can't lead in a relationship when you're following her emotional swings like a puppet on strings. Here's the part that hurts: she may not realize the power she's exerting. She may genuinely believe she's just emotional, just overwhelmed, just expressing herself. But if she's not self-aware enough to see how her behaviors trigger fear, guilt, and confusion in you, then she is emotionally immature. And you are enabling it. Don't confuse this with malice. She's not sitting in a dark room plotting your destruction. Most of this is instinctive. Many women were never taught to self-regulate. They were taught to feel, to express, to be heard, but not to self-contain, not to sit with discomfort without projecting it onto someone else. And when a man shows up who absorbs her pain without consequence, she subconsciously hands him more. That man is you. You tell yourself you're strong for absorbing her moods, but that's not strength. That's learned helplessness. That's your childhood echoing through your adult relationship. The feeling that if someone you care about is upset, it must be your fault, and your job to fix it. It's not. Her emotions are hers. Your responsibility ends where your self-respect begins. And I know what you might be thinking. But I love her. I don't want to walk away just because it's hard. That's not love talking. That's trauma. That's addiction to emotional intensity. That's the fantasy that if you just try harder, The chaos will become calm. But real intimacy doesn't demand that you bleed for it. It doesn't hold affection hostage. It doesn't train you to fear silence or mistake guilt for connection. You have to be willing to lose her to find yourself. Because as long as you're living in reaction to her emotional cues, you're not leading, you're surviving. And survival love is the most dangerous kind. It feels urgent, important, deep, but it's shallow. It's reactive. It's built on a foundation of fear. You know this already. That tightness in your chest, the overthinking, the sleepless nights, the strange mix of passion and dread every time you see her name on your screen. That's not intimacy. That's nervous system trauma dressed up as romance. You crave relief, not connection. And here's what happens when you finally stop chasing that relief. She either steps up or steps out. Either way, you win, because you no longer need her to validate your worth. You're no longer afraid of her disappointment. You see her clearly now, not as the girl you idealized, but as the woman she is, with her patterns, her chaos, her charm, her volatility, and you no longer make excuses for it. You no longer think, maybe I'm just not enough for her. You now think, she's not compatible with a man who values peace, and that shift changes everything. You stop rewarding instability with attention. You stop treating her confusion like a puzzle to solve. You let her moods rise and fall without losing your center. You stop being afraid of losing her because you already lost yourself once, and you're not doing it again. From that place, everything becomes simple. You speak with clarity. You say no without guilt. You say yes without fear. And if she tests your boundary, you don't flinch. You don't explain. You don't get angry. You just leave, not out of bitterness, not as punishment, but as proof to yourself that your dignity is not up for negotiation. She may cry, she may beg, she may accuse you of being cold. Let her, because the truth is, the man she truly respects is not the one who gives in, but the one who stands firm, not to dominate, not to control, but to protect the peace he fought to build inside himself. She doesn't mean harm, but if you don't wake up to the game, she will play it until there's nothing left of you. And when it's over, she'll say the words that haunt so many men: I don't know what happened. I just stopped feeling it. No, she stopped respecting you because you stopped respecting yourself. You think love ends with betrayal, but it doesn't. For men like you, it ends with self-erasure, quietly, slowly, 1,000 small decisions where you chose her comfort over your truth. That's how it happens, not all at once, not with one big explosion, but with every moment you flinched when she raised her voice, every time you bit your tongue to avoid starting something, every time you gave in, hoping she'd see how much you care. But she never does, because that kind of caring doesn't inspire closeness. It invites contempt. You become predictable, emotionally neutered, harmless, and the brutal truth: most women can't love a man they don't respect. They'll say they want a man who listens, who supports, who's vulnerable, but the moment you turn that fantasy into reality, they begin to pull away. Because what they actually wanted was a man who listens without losing his edge, who supports without being spineless, who's vulnerable without falling apart. You were never meant to become her therapist, her emotional punching bag, her substitute father figure. You were meant to be her mirror, calm, grounded, unshakable. But you forgot that, because you fell for the trap: if I give her everything, she'll finally feel secure. No, she'll feel powerful, but not safe. Because when your love becomes a performance, when you're constantly trying to manage her mood, fix her feelings, earn her approval, it doesn't feel like love. It feels like pressure. It feels like control. and she will subconsciously rebel against it. Oh, winks. You'll feel it in the way she pulls back, how her texts get colder, how sex becomes mechanical or disappears entirely. You ask if everything's okay and she shrugs. You try harder. She gets more distant. You try even harder. She disappears altogether. That's not a mystery. That's a response. She doesn't want to carry your emotional neediness, no matter how well you hide it behind your nice guy mask. And here's where it gets dangerous, because you'll start chasing closure. You'll want answers. You'll reach out with kindness, with logic, with just one more conversation. You won't get what you're looking for. Not because she's cruel, but because once the emotional seesaw stops working in her favor, once she no longer gets the upper hand through unpredictability, withdrawal, or drama, she loses interest. Whoa, you've broken the dynamic that made her feel in control, and in that moment, your worth collapses in her eyes. You were never her partner. You were her emotional mirror. And when the reflection stops making her feel superior, she looks away. This is why detachment isn't cruelty, it's clarity. When you stop reacting to her storms, you start revealing her patterns. You create space for truth. Not the truth she tells you, but the truth she shows you when she no longer feels in control. That's when you see it. The silence she used as punishment, the affection she used as bait, the tears she weaponized when she wanted to avoid accountability. None of it works anymore, and she knows it. You're no longer trying to earn her. You're evaluating her. You stop asking, "Why is she treating me this way?" and start asking, "Why am I still here?" And that question cuts deep, because it forces you to confront the real issue, not her behavior, but your attachment to the pain. You didn't stay because of love. You stayed because you thought suffering was noble, because the little boy in you believed that if you just endured long enough, one day it would all be worth it, that she'd wake up, look you in the eyes, and finally say, "I see how hard you tried. I'm sorry." But she won't, because she never saw your suffering as love. She saw it as weakness. And now, you see it too. So you begin to withdraw, not to punish, but to protect. You don't announce it. You don't need to. Your energy speaks for itself. The man who once over-explained is now silent. The man who once panicked at distance is now unreachable. The man who once asked for love is now already gone, even if he's still in the room. That's what changes everything. She'll feel the shift before you say a word. She'll test it, try to draw you back into the game. She'll poke, provoke, maybe even seduce. Don't fall for it, because now you know emotional chaos isn't passion. Withholding affection isn't depth. Constant confusion isn't a mystery to solve. It's manipulation to escape. You didn't lose her. You outgrew her, and that hurts. Not because she was the one, but because you were willing to bleed to keep a connection she never earned. Now, your silence is your boundary. Your distance is your self-worth. Your calm is your final answer. She may never understand why you changed. That's okay. You didn't do it for her understanding. You did it for your peace. You don't need to be angry anymore. You don't need revenge. You don't need to teach her a lesson. That's the trap most men fall into, thinking their worth will finally be seen if they make her regret. But here's the truth you've earned. You're not here to be seen. You're here to see clearly. And now, you do. You see how the conversations were never about resolution. They were about emotional leverage. You see how every time you tried to show her how much you cared, it only pushed her further away. You see how the more you gave, the more she questioned your value, because in her eyes, if it was that easy to get, it must not be worth much. That's not love. That's a power imbalance, one that you fed with your own desperation to matter. And now that you've stepped out of the cycle, there's a silence, not just between you and her, but inside you. the absence of chasing, the absence of explaining, the absence of trying to be good enough. That silence, that's not loneliness. That's freedom. That's the space where you start to rebuild the parts of you she trained you to suppress. The voice that says no without guilt. The intuition that speaks before you rationalize. The calm that doesn't flinch in the face of tears, manipulation, or passive-aggressive silence. You remember now what it feels like to own your time, to choose your words, to let someone else's discomfort remain theirs. You remember that your value isn't based on how much chaos you can absorb without breaking. Because here's the final trap: she didn't just test your love, she tested your identity, and she almost won. She almost convinced you that being a good man meant being endlessly tolerant, endlessly forgiving, endlessly patient even when those things were never reciprocated. She almost rewired your sense of masculinity to mean sacrifice without recognition. But you woke up, and now you know. You don't have to convince anyone that you're enough, especially not someone who chips away at your self-respect every time they feel insecure. You don't have to explain your value to someone who benefits from keeping you uncertain. You don't have to prove your love through suffering. That's not love. That's submission with a pretty face. Real love doesn't drain you. It doesn't punish you for being calm. It doesn't teach you that you must earn warmth, affection, or clarity. It shows up. It speaks straight. It respects your silence. It doesn't flinch when you say no. And it doesn't need you to lose yourself in order to stay. You're no longer the man who chases peace through performance. You're no longer the man who thinks she'll finally change if you just love her the right way. You're no longer the man who flinches at rejection because you finally understand the rejection was never about you. It was about the version of you that stopped setting boundaries, the version that confused love with tolerance, the version that accepted manipulation as intimacy. That version died when you stopped answering every emotional test with compliance. You're not bitter, you're not broken, you're just done bleeding for people who call it love. Wow, and maybe one day, she'll look back and realize what she lost. Maybe not. It doesn't matter, because this was never about her growth. It was about your awakening. You walked through the storm thinking love would be the reward, but what you found instead was something better yourself. Clear, calm, unshakable. You'll never fall for the traps again, because now, you don't need to be chosen. You've already chosen yourself. She didn't break you. She revealed what you were too afraid to protect.